Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining tonight's webinar. Our webinars are recorded via WebEx and will be made accessible online after the session. We are now using Cisco WebEx Event Center. If you're having trouble in joining, kindly log out the session and rejoin the meeting room sent to you by WebEx or by entering our meeting room number 570-673-622 and password is HIS123. May we remind attendees that your mics are muted throughout the meeting, but you can chat your thoughts to us through the chat tab. And for questions, please type them in the Q&A tab. Speaker is Ms. Alice Liu. She is the Director of the Information and Communication Technology for Development at Chipago, where she is responsible for the strategy, development, and implementation of health systems strengthening ICT interventions for program initiatives in limited resource environments. Ms. Liu has 10 years of development sector experience in ICTs for global health, financial services, and agriculture. Before joining Chipago, Ms. Liu applied her skills for organizations such as WHO, Rockefeller Foundation, Voxiva, FHI 360, Mercy Corps, and Chemonix. Prior to working in international development, Ms. Liu worked in the technology sector in California, managing teams to deliver multi-million-dollar e-commerce, data warehouse, and customer relationship management systems through the full project lifecycle. Ms. Liu earned her MBA from Yale School of Management and a Bachelor of Science degree in Computer Science from the University of California, Santa Barbara. We will now call in our speaker, Ms. Alice.
Okay. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, Ms. Alice.
Okay, great. Okay. All right, thank you. And let me go ahead and share my PowerPoint to start us off. Let's see. Okay. All right, let's go into the slideshow. All right. Hopefully you're able to view this, Cha. Does this look correct?
Yes. Yes, it's loading now, Ms. Alice. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you everyone for joining this evening or morning or afternoon, depending on where you are. This is the third in a series of webinars on HIS procurement. So we have gone through an overview of the process and some of the factors to consider in terms of the actual decision, whether to build, buy, or outsource. And finally, we're going to go through some of the tools and templates that have been created. So this is actually based on work that was done through WHO's Health Metrics Network, which this work occurred back in around 2008, 2009. And I was a consultant to Rockefeller Foundation and Voxiva, and then we collaborated with HMN to adapt some of the work that I was doing for Rockefeller and Voxiva and adapting it for HMN. And they had a similar effort going on to give some guidance to public health officials on these types of procurements because, you know, public health officials are health experts and not information systems experts. And, you know, we're grappling with these decisions. And so we tried to come up with some templates and documents to help them. It's still, I recognize it still requires some knowledge. So we always do recommend that health officials work with information systems experts, whether they are on staff or they are consultants that are engaged specifically to help with this procurement process. So let's first walk through just an overview of the process, and then what I'll do is switch back and forth between different documents, various Word documents, Excel files that illustrate the actual tools that you would use. And these are for you to adapt for your own needs. You do not have to follow these to the letter, and I will show a couple different examples of very robust examples and simplified examples. All right, so this is the process flow chart. I know the print is a little bit small. I hope you can see it. Generally, the process would start, of course, with the start of the project. Someone decides that this HIS system is a high enough priority that they are allocating budget and enabling you to start this project. As with anything, you first need to frame this project. What are the overall objectives? What is your strategy to achieving this? You need to define the scope. Initially, you've probably got a lot of things that you want to accomplish, but with limited time and budget and resources, you'll probably need to narrow down the scope. Pull together your stakeholders, your team, your decision makers. The document we'll go through here is the HMN procurement guide and an annex to it. Rather than read out each one of these in the flowchart, I've made slides that highlight each one of these steps. So from the project initiation, we'll go into looking at example requirements documents and some guidance for developing requirements. Then we'll adapt those requirements into an RFP document, and you'll see some sample documents that provide a lot of boilerplate language that your procurement people may want to insert with their own language. And then finally, there's the process of evaluating the proposals that you receive. And what we'll go through here are some scorecards examples. And so why don't we go to this next slide. So the initiation of the project. So a couple of documents that can guide you in more detail are this HMN procurement guide and an annex to this guide. So let me switch over to that. Let's see. Okay, let me switch. Let me just switch to the desktop. I think that's probably going to be. It's probably going to be easier just to switch to the desktop so I can just easily jump back and forth between documents. Okay, so this is the HMN procurement guide. The introduction explains the purpose of the document. Again, we are hoping that this document will help make the process more readily understood and more transparent, and gives you a guide to follow. There's some guidance in terms of key success, and this Health Metrics website, I think now, because of the network not being active anymore, I think that just takes you to a WHO page with some additional materials. These materials, by the way, were never formally published. So I believe really right now the only publicly available source for is through AHIN, which is great. It's great that that we came together to revive these documents and make them publicly available. So the table of contents actually is probably the best way to give you an overview of what is in this document. You can see that we tried to focus on areas that we knew were areas that we received a lot of questions about. Examining the technology options, contracts and licensing. There's a lot of detail here because you may or may not know how to negotiate with vendors and what the different licensing options are. Now, just to caveat this, again, this has not been this document has not changed since this came out in 2009. So it may not list options that are available today or that are more common today. So this gives you at least some sample types of licensing schemes and source code ownership schemes. And then there are several annexes to this document. The other document I wanted to show you, I think, this is the annex of the total cost of ownership. This is this goes into quite a bit of detail. Let me see. Okay, there's the beginning. what the purpose of this annex was to really drill down into some of the details of the entire life cycle of implementing really almost any IT application or business system, but in this case we're talking about health information systems. And it was to highlight what the tasks are if a Ministry of Health was to implement, build and implement the system all by themselves, developing from scratch. It's color-coded to help define the different phases, but also to define in gray the tasks where if the system were outsourced to a software as a service provider, that SaaS provider is the one who bears the responsibility for that task and the cost. And the tasks in yellow are to highlight those tasks where there's shared responsibility and shared cost, burden of cost between the Ministry of Health and the SaaS provider. So I'll scroll through this a little bit to let you scan it, and I believe some of you may have, if you have perused the website already for the Asia eHealth Information Network, then you may have seen these. So it begins with the project initiation, getting that permission to start this project, getting the budget, starting to build the team. Then the team can start working on requirements and understanding the needs. Here in gray, for instance, is an example of some preliminary assessment you may need to do to prepare for the new system. If you are building it in-house, then you're probably also hosting it in-house, and you will need to assess your server room that you have, see whether there are any needs to expand it or expand some of its power capabilities, other requirements such as the air conditioning. These days, I think many of you will probably choose to at least host this portion of it off-site. Off-site hosting for servers is so common that it makes a lot more sense to do that than try and bear that entire responsibility yourself in your own building. But anyways, to proceed here, as you develop your requirements, you will often go through a process of analyzing your business processes, and that will lead to additional requirements that may not have been explicitly stated. So in the end, you will have a complete set of requirements. You will have gone through a prioritization process to complete that, finalize what you think the estimated budget will need to be. That may or may not be an option for all of you. Maybe that you have a fixed budget. And then you can proceed into developing your RFP. The requirements would be a section of the RFP. So again, I do not go into too much more detail because I think we will in the next several slides and documents. I'm just going to scroll quickly through here the life cycle of you as you issue the RFP, you receive proposals, you select a particular company, then you begin implementation. You start drilling into further detail into the design and specific details of the functionality. You now can start deciding on physical procurement. Again, some of this is not really your concern if you are working with a software as a solution, software as a service provider. They will already have the entire physical environment from the hardware to software systems already hosted on their environment, in their environment. So you see this big section in gray is actually not your burden at all if you go with a software as a service provider. There's also less software development involved. It's probably more of an adaptation process than developing from scratch. Testing, you will still need to go through a test process. Lots of different aspects of testing listed here. And these are aspects of testing people sort of don't realize that there are different categories and tend to overlook. Training, and then do you go live? And then there's ongoing maintenance and support. So this is just an overview of the life cycle, but just wanted to show you that there is this document that drills into much more detail. The HMN procurement guide also goes into some detail on as we move on into helping you understand your rights as you work with a vendor, that you do have the right to make reasonable changes to requirements. This is here because there have been situations that we had heard of where that the Ministry of Health staff felt that they were really at the mercy of the vendor, that the vendor seemed to have all the control. They really didn't know how to negotiate with them and how to assert themselves, really. All right, let me switch back to the next step in the RFP process. As we discussed, you'll develop your requirements, and there are some illustrations of some requirements in the sample RFP documents and also in the HMN procurement guide. So let me switch back to the procurement guide first, because that's a nicer, I think, high-level version. And let's see, page 4 to 15. Okay, let's scroll there. Let's see. Okay, so here is a higher level overview of the main sections of an RFP. Oops, no, I always get that prompt. These are the overall high-level descriptions of each section, and then some sample requirements to use. And if you attended the last webinar, then these sections or these types of requirements will be familiar to you. So there's a general category of requirements, such as, let's say, the bidder must have a presence in your country and have implementing partners also in country. These don't fall under any specific category, so it just falls under general. Then an example of functional requirements might be that the system must be able to retrieve a patient record and see a dashboard that shows a brief description of the last 3 visits, the diagnosis and treatment, as well as vital statistics and the home village. So this is to hopefully illustrate to you the types of detail that would go into each category of requirements, as well as to help explain what each category of requirements is. If you look at the example of data requirements, the need to accommodate more than one type of patient ID, the need to integrate with a national ID system. These hopefully help illustrate to you what a data requirement might be. Reporting requirements, technical requirements. This is really for getting into more of the technical details. The system might need to interoperate with another system. That will imply that there need to be APIs. You may want to define that this system must be able to support 100 simultaneous users. Maybe a certain number of transactions per day if this is a potentially high volume system that will have a lot of interaction. Maybe it could be a supply chain system for tracking your drugs and supplies. A lot of transactions might be every time someone is depleting the supply, they are using supply. So this gives you, again, as we scroll through this, an example of these requirements. People forget sometimes these are requirements they forget to include operational requirements. That this company must be able to provide technical support to you during your business hours, and be specific. Don't just say our business hours, be very specific. And for instance here, this doesn't say the time zone, so you probably should mention the time zone to be very specific. Security requirements, again, security is an area that people often tend to gloss over. These days, people are more security conscious. Performance requirements, you would be surprised at how long 3 seconds actually is. It actually feels like a long time when you're sitting in front of the computer and you press the submit button and you're waiting for the screen to refresh. So, oh, sorry, here's the performance requirements, the example of 100 simultaneous users. There may be quote unquote business requirements. Here's the one example. So this gives you a high level version of some requirements. As well, this refers to the Annex B for a sample RFP document. So why don't we switch to that? This is the one that goes into a lot more detail. So you see that this has an extensive list of instructions to bidders. Now, to be clear, this came from a financial accounting system template that then I adapted to the to health information systems. But this section is actually not that different from system to system. It really will depend on the degree of oversight and I guess involvement that you will have from procurement, from contracts, from other groups. Let's see. So this, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to click right into the sections. This is a dynamic table of contents, so you can click straight to that section if you click on it. So these again, these are the same sections you just saw in the HMN procurement guide, but with more detail, as you can see the subsections listed here. So quite a bit of detail. Section 2 is the one that, I'm sorry, let's see. I think section 2 might go into some more detail. I think I said section. So here's where you can explain the current situation, that if there is any background information that would be helpful, you think, to the bidders, the preparation you have done already to date. That actually is helpful because as bidders are estimating the cost and the timeline, they may budget this work into their cost and timeline, not realizing that you've already done some of this work. So this actually is not a bad idea to include. This data room ID is optional. That mainly is for confidential documents that you think the bidder might need to review in order to prepare to respond to this proposal. Again, that financial accounting system, that was, they did have a need for this. They had, I think, sample budgets, sample reports, other details that included financial information that they considered confidential. So they created a room that was made available to bidders if they wanted to come visit. And so in the health information system context, that may or may not be applicable. So there's more detailed sections here. Scope of work, this is where I think I'm just trying to scroll to where they trying to see, we've got more details here. Anyway, this is the scope of work. Let me go back to the PowerPoint. Okay. Oh, and Appendix B to M, that's what I was looking for. That's where then you can really drill down into the details of your requirements. So if I scroll, let's see. Okay, here let's see. Okay, that's already script all the way to security. You can see there are tables here set up for the requirements. So again, we break it down by category of requirements. This is the description or definition of each category. And then we actually ask the bidder to respond, and this is quite detailed. Again, this is based on my knowing how bidders sometimes might sort of be vague in their answer, and you need them to be clear, because they might say, yes, we provide that functionality, but in fact, it may not exist in the current version of the software. It may be planned and under development in the next version of the software. So in the bidder's mind, they may feel comfortable saying, yes, we provide that functionality, when in fact it doesn't exist in the current system today. So that's why we get more explicit in terms of how the functionality might be made available. And actually, I think the scenario I just described, not even sure if it's listed here. And obviously you can modify these definitions for your own purposes. Let's see, I'm just scanning this quickly. So for instance, just that example I gave, I would probably want to edit one of these. For instance, maybe the response code 6 should say, it's not part of the standard package, but it is in the next to release, under development, under development, something like that. So this is to instruct the bidder to be very clear about whether they provide this functionality or feature or not, or meet this requirement or not. Also, the requirements are prioritized. It's a mandatory requirement, it's optional, or it's nice to have. And you could say this is if you want to equate it to a number, a 3, 2, and a 1. Okay, so if we look at an example of functional requirements and what the template looks like, and this is, again, just illustrative. You might have a patient management module. The first requirement, it's mandatory. It's that it must integrate with all other submodules. That may seem a little obvious, but this is just illustrative. And here, in the response code column is where the bidder would enter that number value, 7 through 0, and then they can provide comments. And below, you can see other potential functional requirements grouped by the module or the area, the functional area. Let's see, so these are just examples. See, data requirements, again, similar format, and just example requirements. You can see also there's sort of like a requirements numbering scheme that that you may or may not follow this format. Again, it's up to you. This is just it's just useful mainly, I think, when it comes to discussion. And if you and your team are discussing requirements and you refer to, well, remember requirement number 22, but you may have you may want to be able to sort of code that, say, well, remember data requirement number 22, or reporting requirement number 22. That at least gives you a little bit more of a context to work with. But so you can see in the reporting requirements, there are more examples here. Okay, so let's switch back. I think we've gone through some example requirements that can go inside the RFP. So so now you're ready. You've developed your RFP, and you're ready to issue the RFP. And actually, we've just gone through quite a bit of this. The hardware modules, though, we have not looked at yet. Let me see, where do I have that? Here we go. Okay, so this was work done by another consultant, and I'm trying to remember their history on this, but I think it wasn't developed specifically for HMN, I don't believe. I could be wrong, but he was very kindly shared this with us. So this document also goes through, and I think I can expand the left side here, the life cycle Very similar approach is that there's a design, then the tender, and then the deployment. And this document goes more into details of the hardware components, networking, helping you specify, if you need to specify the hardware environment, your infrastructure for this system. So the networking environment, let's see, infrastructure such as the wiring that would be needed in your facility, and also he broke it down into there's a large implementation or a smaller implementation. So this, I'm not spending too much time here because I'm not sure how many of you will really be going to this level of detail, needing to host it yourself. As you can see, there are quite a few considerations. You would want to involve your systems administrators, your networking administrators to help you specify your needs. For instance, or they would specify the architecture. So a lot more information described here. Definitely going into much more technical detail than I can go into. I'm not a network engineer or a system administrator. So this is just to prepare your environment if you are going to host it yourself. Okay. So now you've issued your RFP. Now you can evaluate and make your selection. So there are, oh, sorry, let me back up for a second. I wanted to show you a much simpler RFP. An example from actually a JPIGO project that we simplified for our needs. It's not for a health information system. It's actually for developing a mobile game for adolescent youth and reproductive health. And so what we did was we simplified it and you can see from this table of contents, we have fewer sections than the other documents. If you look at this is the original document we looked at. Let me just go all the way back up to the table of contents. You can see the instruction to bidders is a lot more detailed, 30 sections within that. And we have here, let's see, 8. And they're not long sections, as you can see. 3 of these are. This is just essentially a 2 to 3 page invitation to bidders. Then with the scope of work and requirements, we still have these main sections. It's still good practice to give the background, state the objectives, assumptions. And then our requirements, this being a mobile game, it's not as detailed as a full health information system, but we still had requirements related to or requesting the RFP, wanting details on how they approach project management, what's their methodology to the implementation, other project services such as design services or ongoing support to help with data analytics, that sort of thing. And then this proposal format section, which again we had, and I think if I go back to if I go back to this sample, there is a very detailed proposal format section. This isn't detailed here in the table of contents, but you see it's about 10 pages long. And in this one, it's only about 3 pages long in defining the proposal format. And the reason for this section is that it makes it easier if you specify the format that you want bidders to use when they respond to a proposal, so that when you receive multiple proposals, you can compare them side by side more easily. They all included the same content. They all included an overview of their company. They all described their approach and methodology. They described the staff that they would bring to this project. So it helps you do a more of an apples to apples comparison if they're all following the same format. Let's see, and I think even if I go to this budget cost breakdown section, oh, we didn't go into detail here, but we asked for some specific components. So this is, so I wanted to show you a simpler version that you can use the more elaborate sample RFP template to create your own more simplified version. There's and at the end of the day, it's what's most useful to you. The details might be preferred by some people who want a very, very detailed and rigorous process. Others may decide that that's a lot more effort than it's worth, and we can really simplify it. All right, so that's what I wanted to show you, the kind of two versions of an RFP document. Okay, so now we can go into the evaluation. I also have two versions of this. So we have this detailed version of an evaluation, and then I have a simplified version, also using the actually two simplified versions of an evaluation. So let's see, let's go through, this is the complicated one. Okay, so this was again based off this very detailed RFP for a financial accounting system. The people who developed this, they were economists, they were financial people, so they love Excel. So you can see they created quite a detailed spreadsheet. I mean, I love that they invested this amount of time, and if I ever need to go this amount of detail, I am definitely going to rely on this spreadsheet. They summarize. They basically have this summary sheet that is driven by all the formulas. It's got all the formulas pulling the details from all these other tabs. To summarize how well when they scored the vendor's proposal, how well it met the functional requirements, the technical requirements. You can see all these different categories in terms of requirements. And then the more, you could say, soft requirements. What did you think about their methodology and approach, their capability, their track record, their response on the training they would provide. There was a weight because some requirements or some aspects may be more important than others. For some people, as you can see here, the functional requirements and the reporting requirements are the most critical. Operational requirements, performance requirements were less critical in their mind. So they create a weighted score. They and then summarize this entire section is summarized in this percentage, and this entire section is summarized in this section. And then there's a bar chart here that also shows this information in bar chart form. So they, again, these guys loved Excel, the team that created this. And so you can see all the tabs here. And for instance, let me see what we have under reporting. Again, this is illustrative, so I didn't completely fill this out. But this is where we can match the response code and then put in our score. So much similar to this. I think it might be rare for you to actually use this unless you are working with people who really love the details and want to drill into this detail. But what I like about this is how it's very easy to summarize that information in this sheet because of all the formulas built in. The simpler version that I created here actually wasn't for the mobile game, but this is just a very simple version of pulling the main concepts from that other version, where we had our main criteria, we scored them. Each individual used this spreadsheet to score them, based on the percentage, to what degree do we feel they met that criteria, and then it calculates the weighted score, and by the criteria and then the overall weighted score. So in this example, each individual filled this out, and then we met as a team to actually have a discussion about this, and then we actually created a group rating overall. And we actually compared our group rating and our individual rating to see who was consistent. So the vendor that came out on top for me as an individual was that the same vendor that came out on top when the entire group scores were pulled together. And so that was sort of an effort to hopefully ensure that everyone was bought in, that everyone felt they were heard, and that when we made that decision, that everyone felt like that everyone was on board with that decision. That vendor A or B or C or D, the one that was selected, that everyone felt good about going with that vendor. Now, another approach, instead of using Excel, is for the mobile game, actually, we did it a little bit more qualitatively. Let me find that one. Let's see. So we same approach with defining criteria and it being kind of even more qualitative than the last than the previous example. And each individual put in their comments for company A and B, and they filled this out. They had space for additional comments, and then they could enter their overall recommendation. And then the definition of the criteria is on the next pages. So bidder eligibility. This is pulled from the RFA, that they've been in business for at least 5 years. There's been no declaration of ineligibility due to corrupt or fraudulent practices. So this is pulled from some of the criteria in the RFA. Conformance to the proposal format. This is interesting. I wouldn't have. I don't know if this is always going to be an indicator, but in some cases, if they follow your instructions for the proposal format, that might be an indicator of whether or not they will follow your instructions throughout the rest of the project, meaning following your requirements, meeting your timelines. It's that attention to detail is really what I was looking at here. So again, this is just a definition of the criteria. Let's see if there's anything else here. So for you, of course, for different systems, you will have different details defining this criteria. So this is a much more qualitative approach because this is a much simpler type of application, just a mobile game. I shouldn't say just a mobile game, but definitely simpler in so many respects. So I think that's the last example of the evaluation matrix. So are there any questions? And should I stop sharing the screen? Let me stop sharing the screen.
Great, thank you for that lecture, Ms. Alice. It's a very detailed one. So everyone who has questions, please type them in the Q&A tab. If you cannot find the Q&A tab, please type them in the chat box. All right, for our first question is, for context, what was the mobile game about? This was the question.
Yes, so the mobile game was, so we had a little bit of funding to test out an idea. We had a program in Kenya working with Kenyan university students, and it was this program was to develop their life skills. So it was actually funded by Merck, this program called Brighter Futures. And the approach they took was that we wanted to teach, or I guess educate the students about contraception and safe sex, healthy behaviors, but in a format that wasn't sort of the scolding, lecturing type of format. That it's probably safer not to have sex at all, but also knowing that the reality is that they will probably engage in sexual behavior, that there are safer ways to do that in different forms of contraception and so forth. So the challenge was to educate these university students, but in a way that they would receive information well, that they weren't being lectured at, scolded, and looked down upon. So the program actually had a very good template for their approach. They held workshops, but as an add-on to that, we wanted to try out a mobile game. And so this is our first time developing a mobile game, and we, as you can see, we went through an RFP process to select a mobile game developer, and the design and the kind of story of the game was putting them through a situation of kind of a misunderstanding. It was a combination of situations. It was and I'm sorry if some of this information or language might be a little bit frank, but if you work in health, you probably do have these kinds of conversations. It was a misunderstanding between two friends, and that that one friend who has been in quote unquote the friend zone, but they secretly really like their friend, but they don't know how to get that across and break out of the friend zone when they want it to be something more serious. It was combined with the concept of sexting, which you may have heard that term, where someone sends a sexually oriented text message. The content is something sexy, and they're flirting with you. It's beyond just flirting via text message. And so that's what the game, that's how the game situation starts, is that we put the players in a situation where the player sends a sext to their friend when they meant to send it to their girlfriend or boyfriend. So this is an accident, and this friend now sees their chance and shows up at their dormitory room, and now the situation escalates. They give their friend a big kiss and a hug, and now they are in an awkward situation and have to work through that situation. And so we came up with various scenarios of what would happen next. It was basically a choose your own adventure style game. You have options of what do you do next. Do you just shove them out the door and close the door on them? Do you take them in and have a conversation? What do you do next? So each decision that you make leads to another scenario and then another set of decisions to make. And through that process, that's when we introduce opportunities to get advice, to they have they're thinking in their minds what to do, and we present questions to them that relate to, for instance, can you get pregnant just by kissing? These kinds of questions that come up, these myths that we wanted to dispel. We inserted these throughout the game. So yeah, it was a really interesting experience, a really good learning experience for us to go through that. I think, yeah, and if anyone's interested in more about that, we can talk more offline.
All right, thank you, Ms. Alice. Here's another question. It's from Dr. Gupta as well. Thank you for the details. It's really interesting. That kind of system would seem to benefit from agile development and human-centric design. Is that the process your team used?
I would say yes, kind of informally, I would say. I mean, we had to sort of flow chart this just for us to make sure that we had every scenario covered and no loose ends, and if there were decision points that we didn't complete to a conclusion. And so we iterated on that quite a bit. And then the developers developed the game. We saw like the initial storyboard. We saw an early version of the game, gave feedback. They iterated on that. So there were probably, I don't know, I'm trying to think, maybe 4 or 5 iterations at least. We didn't fully finish the game, and the funding didn't allow us to really fully release it. So that's, it's something that would have been great to fully release, but there were some changes we still wanted to make. We wanted to do more testing with students. Like we had done some really small scale testing with about 25 students. But because we didn't have enough funding to go further than that, it was never publicly released. But yeah, we definitely iterated on it, refined it. We wanted to iterate on it after getting the feedback from those students. So we would have probably gone through a few more cycles before making it publicly available.
All right. Any more questions from our participants? I guess that's the last one for tonight, Ms. Alice.
Okay.
All right. So our attendees, if you have any questions, please feel free to email us, and then we will be forwarding your questions to our speaker. All right. We have Dr. Bunchay on the line, AHEN's chair. Hello, Dr. Bunchay, would you like to speak?
Yes. Thank you, Alice, for a very interesting detail on this. I think it's very useful for us as a guideline. Actually, I would like to ask one question, but I just have the mic right now. Can I ask the last question?
Oh, definitely.
Yes, my question is that it seems to be very detailed, and the more challenge of the developing country is that even we don't have people to look into of these detail. And do you have because HMN fund to developing these tool, have any experience on the country like in Africa or in other developing country that use this guideline, and if they use how they customize to use this guideline and template over?
No, that's a good question. I would have to find out. I'm not sure what happened after this was made available. The HMN folks may have shared it with other people. I do know that Mark Landry at WHO, I think he still, this is actually how these webinars came about. He still uses it, and there was a discussion in, I guess, at your DACA meeting, where he said he still references these documents. I'm not sure which countries he's talking to when he references these documents, but so we may want to follow up with Mark Landry to find out if he knows of some countries that have taken these and adapted it for their own use. But that would be really great if countries have done that. I'd love to get their feedback and see examples, see what their adaptation looks like. Because I think that, some countries what I have seen, for example, where there's just a 2-page RFP. I have seen examples where it's at least a more extensive RFP, but very vaguely defined, not very very detailed or rigorous. So I know there's still a lot of guidance needed to help people through this process. But I'm still in touch with some of the HMN team members who work on this. So I can easily follow up with them to find out if before HMN was discontinued, if they had other countries use this, and then we can follow up with Mark Landry also.
Yes. Anyway, it's very useful. I think this guide is more objective, not vaguely, and then we can use and customize it or adapt it to the situation. At least the guideline will guide us to this. it may be not very detailed, like you say that the Excel that it has a very detailed, and you come up with a more simplified version. Uh, but I'm sure that this tool will be very useful to our community, to our network, and we will uh, definitely report to you that if any one countries use this tool to be a guide for the and for procurement or even for propose for the budget. But I think that it comes, and thank you very much. We hope that we can we will have your help on this kind of the knowledge in the next on in the near future. Anyway, thank you very much, Alice.
So thank you for your interest and feedback. I do hope that these will be helpful to you all, and I look forward to engaging on other webinars. And it's so great that your network is providing this service. I'm sure that everyone in the Asia region is finding this incredibly useful to have this network. So. And Africa is following along, creating their network, following the AHEN example. So it's really great that you've provided this leadership. Thank you so much, and look forward to engaging with you all online or in person.
Okay, thank you, and goodbye, good night, maybe good morning, good afternoon to you all. Bye.
Same here. Bye-bye.